Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, Jason Timpf is about to stop by for our weekly NBA playoff hit. Before we go to Jason, hey, download the Game Time app. Takes about 90 seconds. All right, I'm waiting. All right, thanks, Game Time app. I want you to use the code COLIN, C-O-L-I-N. That'll give you $20 off your first purchase. Prices on the Game Time app go down the closer you get to tip off. So it's an authorized marketplace of professional basketball like none other. Makes getting playoff tickets fast, easy, and great prices and great seats. All right, take the guesswork out. They have zone deals at Game Time. These are great. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, take out all the guesswork. You know where you're sitting before you get there. Game Time app, download it. The code is Colin, C-O-L-I-N. That'll get you $20 off your first purchase. Download it today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed with a Game Time app. I use it. You should too. All right, it is customary Sunday night. You hear it mostly on Monday morning. Jason Timpf, podcast is Hoops Tonight. It's interesting. Schedules can matter. NFL will release their schedule on Wednesday, and I think it's a big deal. We all know who everybody plays already, but it's the order. For instance, playing in Denver high altitude in September when you're coming out of camp has always been tough. Playing Andy Reid in September, tough. Some of the defensive coaches experiment more offensively early. Belichick never had a great September. So, and also back-to-back tough games, road games. Miami would prefer to never go into Buffalo with Tua as a quarterback in December and January. They'd love to get that game out in, September, October when the weather's great. So there are absolute, dome teams. They don't want to play December, January games up north. When the league had a gap between games 2 and 3, Denver, Minnesota, and it hurts Minnesota's momentum and it gives Denver time to prepare. You get that extra film session or 3, it's a totally different team. I mean, Denver was so bad defensively, so lethargic. Now it's almost like Denver saying, let Ant get his. He's going to get 40. We're not going to stop him. And let's shut down the other dudes. But I mean, it does feel like to me that time, an extra day or two here for a really smart veteran team and a good staff feels so substantial.
No, absolutely. Minnesota came out with pretty bad energy in game 3. Ant himself admitted it after the game. He's like, I came out with low energy. Meanwhile, for 3 consecutive days, Denver had to sit around and listen to everyone talk shit about them. like literally, it was like they just got humiliated for 3 consecutive days. And, I said after game 2, it wasn't really about basketball to me. I thought that Minnesota brought a level of physicality that Denver had not seen at all in the previous 5 rounds that they had played in the postseason. And I thought they got a little caught off guard by it. And specifically in game 2, they crumbled mentally in a way that they never had before, right? And honestly, do you remember in game 3 at the beginning, that play when Anthony Edwards was messing with his shoulder for like 30 seconds?
Yeah.
That was the first play of the game. And on that play, Nikola Jokic just rocked him with the screen, just like a super, super hard screen. And when I went back and looked over the film in that game, like really all that happened was Denver did all the same things that they have done all season. They just did them harder, faster, with more force. They finally met the physical confrontation. And when they did, you found out pretty quickly they can still score on these guys. It's not like Jamal hasn't seen a lengthy perimeter defender before. Of course he has. It's not like Jokic hasn't seen 2 centers on the floor before. Of course he has. They've all seen that before. They just didn't handle it well. And then the big one here, and this is something that I called out before the series, and I really was surprised that it took this long, but Minnesota's a mediocre offense. Anthony,
listen,
go ahead.
Listen, Anthony, that's what I think Denver looked at and said, just give Ant his 40. They have a lot of very good athletes and length, but if Karl-Anthony Towns, like tonight, is just kind of just wandering, there's not really a second scoring option on this team. There really isn't. So you need Towns, who's always been, to me, talented, but a little flaky, a little inconsistent. You know what I mean? Like, He disappears. Anthony Davis gives you the same defense every game. Karl-Anthony Towns, who is more gifted offensively, should be as good offensively as Anthony Davis is defensively. He's not. He's lost. And I thought in this game, well, what are we doing here? And when he doesn't deliver, it doesn't matter what Ant could score 50. I mean, Jordan was scoring 63 and they couldn't beat the Celtics. So I do think Denver just said, listen, we're not going to stop this kid and make everybody else work. And I think your point is right, is that if Towns is off, it's an athletic team. They're long. They almost have an extra wing defender and one less shooter than they need.
No, absolutely. And it really comes down to this. They were a mediocre offense all season long. And then they've got a bunch of these streaky guys like Cat, guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, guys like Naz Reid, who are capable of playing at a higher level offensively. But Phoenix couldn't really play them out of that. Denver's lackadaisical defensive effort in the first two games couldn't play them out of that. But as soon as Denver tightened the screws, Cat fell apart, Nickeil Alexander-Walker fell apart, Naz Reid fell apart. Immediately Rudy Gobert looks like a damaging offensive player because he's got stone hands and he can't make quick decisions when he catches on the roll. And so literally Minnesota looked like regular season Minnesota. If anything, it's really impressive that Ant is demonstrating his leap is for real. And specifically on the Karl-Anthony Towns front, this Karl Towns reminds me of a specific type of player I've seen several times in NBA history. The most recent example kind of reminds me of Kevin Love. Now, obviously, Cat has a better pedigree, but it's the big scoring, kind of hybrid big, but one that's not actually that superior of an athlete compared to his peers.
Right.
And that can shoot. And so what happens is during the 82 game regular season, they get their 25 points a night because they can bully smaller players and they can hit threes. But every single time Kevin Love would run into a really big athletic forward, someone like a Thaddeus Young or a Draymond Green, and just render Kevin Love into a spot up shooter. And then everyone be like, oh, LeBron made Kevin Love a spot up shooter. It's actually, that's all he can do when you reach these super high levels of intensity. Aaron Gordon demolished Karl Towns tonight. Just completely snatched his soul for the world to see.
Well, he's a much better athlete. Yes. He's a much better athlete.
It's like the guy who's a little bit shorter but stronger, more athletic, kind of like Draymond or Thaddeus Young, like I was talking about with Kevin Love. They can beat Karl Towns to spots and so make it so that he can't drive. And then if he can't drive, he's suddenly just a shooter. And it's with the shots aren't going in, then his impact craters. And so, there's another conversation to be had. I mean, you even when Minnesota was playing well, were pointing out is Karl-Anthony Towns still going to be here in the future? And it's there's a real conversation to be had about the team build of Minnesota in the sense that Karl-Anthony Towns is what he is. He's never going to become a super reliable secondary shot creator. You can't let Ant go out there by himself every night as the only guy who can get to his spots and create shots. So I don't know what they do about that in the long run, but tonight was the last two games. This is not game 1 and 2 of a series where you're feeling each other out. Everyone knows exactly what everyone's good and bad at right now, and nobody on Minnesota can score except for Ant, and that's a major problem.
Well, and also, I mean, Jokic and Ant are transcendent. So to some degree, going into a game, you're giving up 30 plus. Mm-hmm. Bird, Jordan, Kobe. Some guys are just you've been in the gym. That guy's going to get his. The series really comes down to it's amazing. Gordon versus Karl-Anthony Towns. You're oh, that's kind of what the series has come down to, because you can only do so much to neutralize a superstar in this sport. And then all of a sudden, and again, this is what champions do. We forget this. I remember a couple of years ago, the Celtics played the Warriors in the finals. And through the first couple of games of the series, through 3 games, Boston was so much better than Golden State. And you're Steve Kerr gets an extra day. There's preparation. They go to Boston. And you're who unplugged the electricity with the Celtics? What happened? And I think the mistake I make thinking Denver's cooked is, you give these championship teams time. They're well coached. I mean, Malone's been there. I mean, you forget. I mean, he was 7 years in, and they just let it bake. I mean, there was no pressure. They couldn't win with Jokic for years. So this is a team that's, they've been through a lot of these battles. They've lost a lot of them in the early years, but they've had to make major adjustments. And I rush to judgment. I look at Denver now, and I'm oh, this this is what I thought the series would look
Mhm.
like, which is, again, they would match their length and physicality, and Jokic would just, Murray and Jokic are both elite scorers. So I will say this. I don't know why the media does this. They get so protective from people that don't need it. But Ant is spectacular. Like, I always felt this about, and I'm not saying he's Jordan, but he has some Jordan qualities, and that's okay. Mahomes, they're talking about Caleb Williams has Mahomes qualities. Yes, he does. All the scouts are saying, hey, he plays like Patrick Mahomes. There are things about Ant, but the most Jordan thing about him is I remember watching Jordan against Phoenix in his prime. And I was sitting on the couch with a friend watching it. And I'm like, okay, he's not the best shooter, the best ball handler. He's not the quickest guy in the league. And he's 6'6". Why does it look like he's like the only Division I player playing at the Y? Like, it's like he makes it look so easy. And gets past people on the first step. These are NBA athletes. He just gets past everybody. So when you watch it on TV, I don't think you would appreciate it. The ability to, everybody knows where he's going. He loves the first step. He sizes you up. He makes the game look easy. Mahomes does this. Jordan did this. You're like, why? How? I'm watching Ant, and even against good defenders. I mean, Jamal Murray switched off to him one time. I'm like, this is not even competitive. Murray's a world-class athlete. I mean, you've been in gyms with guys, but I look at this and I'm like, when guys start making 38 points look easy, there's about 3 in the league at any one time that can do that. Maybe 1.
Yeah, there's athletic, and then there's athletic among the athletes. It's like an entirely different stratosphere, right? And like
Right.
that's kind of to me the difference between like a Jayson Tatum and an Anthony Edwards. Like Jayson Tatum is a very good NBA athlete.
Yes.
Like he's close to that like truly transcendent, but
Yes.
there's clearly a difference between Ant sizing up an elite defender and beating him off the dribble and Tatum doing the same thing. It's like that next level of elite top tier athleticism. Honestly, regardless of what happens the rest of this series, and I do think Denver is gonna pull this out now. I think they've effectively just rendered Minnesota's offense useless, and they're gonna go home, and I think they're gonna win Game 5. And the biggest thing too is like Minnesota hasn't been particularly competitive in either of these games, which is a major concern, right? But like no matter what, it's very clear that Anthony Edwards is here to stay. I think he's the next guy in that like line of truly transcendent great American basketball players. Like it went from MJ to Kobe and it went from Kobe to LeBron. And like there have been guys along the way that have had their little moments, but nobody that really had the potential to take over the league for a long time. And can't you just see it, Colin? Can't you just kind of imagine what the next 10 years are like for Ant? You could just kind of imagine him continuing to ascend and getting better and better. I started to think tonight, like if Ant could have pulled this game out, it could have been one of those transcendent moments you think about, like, LeBron in like 2007 or 2008 kind of thing. And honestly, like Denver's just too good. Like that's really all it is.
Yeah.
Like LeBron ran into the '08 Spurs and got swept. So like at a certain point, it doesn't matter how good you are at that phase of your career. It is a team sport. And like literally while all of his veteran teammates were falling apart, he was continuing to ascend. It was really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, and this is appropriate. Jordan couldn't get through a fully formed Pistons or Celtic dynasty. So, I mean, Denver's fully formed. They have the experience. They're better offensively. They have Minnesota's length. So, again, this is the way it works. It's the baby steps. He comes in, he pushes and makes a Denver, step back. They got hit in the gin. They dazed the champion and they lost. That's what happened to Jordan. That's what happens to LeBron. So, to me, this is totally appropriate. We are amazed by the individual player, but they still have tweaking to do. I mean, we all know what Minnesota's going to do in the offseason. They're probably going to move Karl-Anthony Towns, and they're going to get more offensive players. I mean, eventually Jordan needed Pippen and Kerr. Like you don't have to be a nightly great player, but you do have to find players that take something off Ant's plate a little bit.
Do you think Minnesota should go after KD?
It's not terrible because, again, the great gift of KD, you can give him the ball 8 seconds on the shot clock, 4, he'll get a great look. He doesn't need, it's a little Klay Thompson, but obviously much better. He doesn't need the ball in his hands. That's why the Jalen Brunson KD works. The emotional part of KD to the Knicks, Tibbs, that style, is he willing for it? Let's pivot to that. because listen, the Knicks are beat up. There's nothing you can do. Just set the guys down, get ready for Tuesday, be embarrassed. You'll be on fire Tuesday. So OG is hurt. OG got banged up this year as well. Brunson's not 100%. We already know Mitchell Robinson, Julius Randle are out. So this is a limited team offensively without injuries. So we all kind of kept waiting for this team that was playing with Game 7 intensity to just collapse. Just the wheels came off, and they sort of did. I still think they have a chance to win this series. But I was saying this earlier this week, and I said it last time I was on with you. There's a lot of different scenarios with the Knicks, and it's very easy to talk yourself into we're just a piece away. But the East is going to get better. It's just going to get better. Butler's going to be healthy. Dame's going to be healthy. Giannis will probably be back. Embiid will get help. There's so many scenarios for the Knicks, and I do wonder if instead of looking at Kevin Durant and Paul George, they find another OG on the market. They go get another really good player, because I do think playing hard, maybe it has limitations if you fade. I don't think they could beat a Denver, Minnesota's length. But the Knicks have done something the last 3 years that they haven't done for 20, which is they're patient. They're like, you look at them and you're like, this is a well-run team. They don't take, they used to take, big reaches on Amari Stoudemire when he had bad knees. It's like, well, what are you doing? Like every GM in the league's like, Amari's, he's got like 2 years left. He's cooked.
Or trading for Carmelo when they could have signed him as a free agent 1 year later, not got the roster. Yeah.
I don't know exactly what they do. I think Paul George fits everywhere. But again, it's such a unique culture. Like, it's just not for everybody. I can't wait to watch. They're not a championship team. I think, listen, they're not. We know it. There's too many great players, too many good teams in this league. Knicks are not a championship team. I don't know what the solution is. I want to watch it. It's not in the draft. We know that. It's not a good draft. KD's, I just don't know. KD is, boy, you look at him post Golden State. He's different. He's running through coaches, and Tibbs has power in that room. Now for a segment called Making It Look Easy by Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. The Pacers cruising to a huge win over the Knicks, 32 points. That looked pretty easy, right? Just like Indiana did, Morgan & Morgan does the exact same thing. Over 100 offices nationwide, over 800 lawyers. This is what they do. $15 billion recovered through the years with 300,000 clients. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record to get you full, fair, and reasonable compensation. Okay, they've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. If you're ever injured, go to forthepeople.com/Colin. If you're ever injured, go to forthepeople.com/Colin or dial #529 to check out America's largest injury law firm. Winning in the NBA is hard. Morgan & Morgan makes it look easy. Winning in the NBA is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is really easy. Nobody's pushing back on Tibbs.
Yeah, I think for sure they need somebody that can play that's bigger. The biggest problem they're running into now is their best 5 guys are 4 guards and Isaiah Hartenstein because of the OG Anunoby injury. So they're literally running out there with Brunson, Hart, DiVincenzo, and Deuce McBride with Isaiah Hartenstein and trying to make plays happen. And there have been moments where they've been playing Alec Burks at the 4. They're really, really undersized right now. And so I do get encouraged by the idea. Just if you could somehow get KD without OG Anunoby, which I think would be really difficult, I like the idea of having OG at the 3 with KD and a Hartenstein because you're just really big on the front line. And then you could still have a DiVincenzo or a Hart at the 2 so you maintain some of that physicality. It's just if you had to give up OG, that's such a significant chunk of that identity. Just look at this Pacers series. Since OG Anunoby has gone down, the Knicks just physically look different. They just look different, right?
Yep.
Now, like Indiana has to feel really good going into Game 5, like they're going to win this series because they really controlled things outside of a few clutch stretches in Games 1 and 2, and that's the other thing too. New York actually has a negative point differential to this point in the postseason, which is actually kind of crazy, but it's because they've been in every close game and just pulled it out late. And so you have to get some bounces that go your way. Like even when you look back, it's like how'd they beat the Sixers in game 6? It was it was a Josh Hart 3 from the top of the key at like that broke a tie in the final minute. You know what I mean? Like it's big shots at the end of games. Like it really, the teams that can win the championship, they don't need to do that every single night. So I do think they need some more firepower, but it's just going to be really difficult to toe that line between adding firepower while sacrificing the physical identity, which is such an important part of how they win right now.
Yeah. So, I said this last week, and I lose track sometimes because I'm doing 3 hours a day and I'm doing this with you and I'm doing other stuff. But I want to talk Celtics for a second. I said the NBA, I grew up in the 70s. It's pretty well chronicled. I could tell you the starting lineups for the Washington team that won, the Portland team, the Sonic team, the Sixer team. Like that was really in my wheelhouse. I was collecting basketball cards. I was like like you are now. I literally just could not get enough. It was the only thing I cared about, when I was a young kid. And then you get dynasties. You get the Laker dynasty and the Celtic dynasty and the Piston dynasty and the Bulls and the Shaq and Kobe and the Spurs. And so all these dynasties come up. And I do think it's the first time we don't have another dynasty. I think we have really good teams. Now, again, Denver wins it. Then you've moved into the Heatles conversation where you're darn close now. It's not a dynasty, but it does have a Spurs feel to it. Like with Jokic, he doesn't need the attention. He's the kind of guy that would take a pay cut. Like, let's just keep doing this, running it back. I don't need the drama. They have a very Spurs feel to them. The star is like a good guy, kind of Brady-esque. Like, just let's just keep our roster. But I was looking at Boston, and I'm like, in this era of good, maybe Boston's just two things. Very good, because they're 500 at home over the last 3 years. Historically makes no sense. That is just not the way it works. Great teams are. So think about this. They're 500 at home in the playoffs. I've only been to one finals. That's against the East. The East has been abysmal for about 4 years. So they're 500 at home in the playoffs against a weak, much weaker conference. It's hard to argue they're elite or special. What they are is very good. I think they don't have a Shaq, a Kobe, and MJ in their prime, not even an Ant. Is it possible they have two Scottie Pippens? And you're like, they're good enough to win a title, but they need some breaks. Because I keep watching them, and just if they're not hitting threes, they get bad fast. Like, you're like, wow, they're almost unserious. Like, the energy's terrible. Is it possible we've overvalued them because it's a big brand? We like Tatum. You have two players. They do point differential regular season. They're outstanding. You can't be 500 at home over 3 years against the East and tell me you're elite. That it would be different, Jason, if they had a title. And then you kind of pull the governor down. Like, we've seen this, the Shaq Kobe teams. It's like, they're great. Or KD and the Warriors. Then you pull it down. Like, let's just get through the regular season. What is Boston? Elite, or in my contention, very good in an era of good.
They're very good. I mean, coming into the season, you and I were on the same page on this. Like, they're kind of on the same level as Denver. And then when we did our playoff preview, we were like, they're kind of on the same level as Denver. Yet they had, like, I can't remember exactly what the Nuggets finished with, but they were a mid-50s team, and the Celtics were a mid-60s team in terms of wins, right? So, like, they've won 60-something games this year, but they're not like a traditional 60-win powerhouse because the Eastern Conference is so weak. And again, it's really this simple. You play 52 games every single season against your own conference. You play 30 against the other conference. So, like, and all you have to do is go look at the ESPN standings and go look at the record for Boston against the Western Conference. They were just another team against the Western Conference. I think if Boston was in the West, they'd be near the top, but they would not have separated themselves the way that they did against the rest of the East. Now, one of the things with Boston, Boston has nowhere near the defensive personnel that Minnesota does. So, like, and that's the scary thing with what Denver's doing right now, is you could not build a better team to guard the Denver Nuggets than what they have. And Denver has sliced and diced them 2 games in a row now. So, like, Denver's going to score on Boston. But what Boston has that Minnesota doesn't is they have a ton of offensive skill. All 5 of their guys in the starting lineup can shoot. Everyone can dribble. And so they do have the ability to kind of space Denver out and have some success there. I think Boston presents some challenges for Denver, but I would pick Denver to beat them. And so, to put it simply, they're just another team in the top tier. Whereas if you looked at the standings, you would view them as having separated. And really, it does come down to Tatum for me. Like Tatum, in my opinion, is somewhere around the 7th to 10th best player in the league. And it's just really difficult to win the championship in NBA history if you don't have one of the top guys. Who won it last year? Jokic, best player in the world. Who won it before that? Steph, top 3 player in the world. Who won it before that? Giannis, top 3 player in the world. Who won it before that? LeBron, Kawhi, KD and Steph, LeBron. Like you have to go all the way back to 2014 with a crazy fluky Spurs team that had magical ball movement and magical everything to find a team that could win a title without a bona fide alpha dog, top 5 superstar, all-time great. And like, as much as I like Jayson Tatum and he's a super nice guy, he had another really insightful quote about media and how much he appreciates that media is given to the game, and like super great guy, great leader of a team, but he's just not as good as the top guys. It's literally that simple.
Well, yeah, and I think this is the first year I've watched Anthony Davis this year and thought he's a 1. I always thought he was the best 2 in league history. I thought it was Pippen forever. And then Anthony, and we've had a few of these, like Ant's a 1. You can just see it. He the trash talk, the intensity, everything. I mean, you don't have to argue about that. Tatum is viewed as an absolute 1. What if, like Anthony Davis, he's the best 2 in the league? Because I really thought this year, I'm like, God, this is a healthy, dominant defender, mostly good offensively, plays through pain, literally changes everything. And it can allow LeBron to be a bad defender and cheat. He allows the team to cheat. And I look at Tatum and I'm like, it's not a knock. I know he makes all NBA, but it's very hard to find an all-time. Basketball is a trash-talking sport. It's an energy juice sport. Most guys that are like top 5 in the league, now Kawhi doesn't talk to anybody, but I mean, most of them have a little bit of a chip, they're almost like play angry, and Tatum doesn't have that. He's got almost like a guy personality, like he lets the game come to him. He can always break guys down. When I've watched him live 3 times, he always gets his shot. But it's like he plays like a 2, but we've anointed him to a 1. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I don't know. When I watch him play, when you say something for 5 straight years, it's probably true. For 5 straight years, we've said Jaylen Brown sometimes acts like he wants the ball more than Jason. Okay, we're on the 5th year of that. Like, that's because it feels true. Right? Am I wrong? Is he a low-end 1 or is he a great 2? Not that it matters, but I watch him and I think his body language, his mentality, how he plays, his aggressiveness, he feels like a great 2.
You start when you're one of those guys, when you're one of the true bona fide top-tier superstars in the league, and you're in your mid to late 20s, you put together awesome playoff performance after awesome playoff performance. Like there is a level of expectation that comes from that. And I think Tatum's 26 now, and he's played 8 playoff games against pretty inferior competition, and he shot below 45% 7 of the 8 games. Like his best game is a 50% night. So like you'd think that there'd be a 14 for 20 game in there somewhere, right? It's one of those things where and it really does come down to the first step for me. He's a guy that doesn't have a great first step and is an inconsistent jump shooter. Like those 2 things are going to render you he does a lot. He's a very good defensive player. He's a much better playmaker than most of his forward peers that he has in the league. He's a very good player. I want to be clear, top 7, top 10 in the league is nothing to to thumb your nose at. But at the same time, there's levels to this. And when you get to those top guys in the league, it's like, how is it that 39-year-old LeBron James was having a monumentally more a productive offensive playoff run than you against inferior competition every single night? It really is bizarre. But at the same, and here's the other thing too, what really concerns me is Boston has no hierarchy. And so because Tatum is not this guy that can really command games offensively every single night, it's like now Jaylen Brown wants the reins. Now Derek White wants the reins. Drew Holiday started game 3 against Cleveland being super aggressive out the gates and looking for his shot. And so really it's actually kind of what leads to some of Boston's bad rhythm games where they look really bad. is like everyone's kind of yanking at the reins and no one can get going. And it's like, that's just not what it's like on these other teams. It's like, if you watch the Cavs, who's running the offense for the majority of the game? Donovan Mitchell. If you watch the Knicks, who's running the offense the majority of the game? Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Halliburton. It's Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. It's Anthony Edwards. It's Luka Doncic. It's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. In Boston, it's like, it's all just vibes. It's like whoever wants to take control can take control. And like, and that's the thing is like, no, like this, if this team's going to get to the promised land, Jason, like you've got to really take control of this thing, because it's all great against Cleveland and it's all great against Miami without Jimmy Butler, but you got a little bit of a tougher team in the next round. And then you're going to walk into most likely a Denver team in the NBA finals that's going to want to snatch your heart the way that they're doing to Karl Towns and all these other guys from Minnesota. And so it's going to get harder and they need more out of him. And he just hasn't been able to get there consistently.
The NBA playoffs are heating up. Man, they have been so good. I know it's over, but Lakers Nuggets may have been a 5-game series. It was great. Knicks, Sixers, amazing. Why don't you sign up for the DraftKings Sportsbook app? It takes 90 seconds. The official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you're in DraftKings, once you sign up, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Great proposition, right? $5, you get $150. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. The code's Colin, C-O-L-I-N. It's me, C-O-L-I-N. Really quick, really easy. If you've never bet sports before, check it out. Really makes the games fun. The code is Colin. New customers get $150 in bonus bets by betting $5 only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Well, and I think if you look at what Brad Stevens did, the construction of the team, Porzingis was off a very good offensive year. Drew Holiday was a better offensive player than Marcus Smart. To me, Brad Stevens is telling you they didn't move off Al Horford, who can have these weird offensive nights. Like, I'm watching Brad Stevens, who is a really smart guy, and I'm like, he wanted more offense. Like, he clearly, if you go look at Kobe, it was getting people that didn't threaten to take shots against Kobe or MJ or right. You don't want to take the ball to even Jalen Brunson's hands. Like, don't take the ball to his hands too much with Luka, although his ball usage rate is too high. But it kind of looks like Brad Stevens said, I'd like to get better scoring in the front court. I'd like a better offensive player than Marcus Smart. Like, he was just adding offensive chips. That's okay. But it's a lot of times if you have the guy, it's not about that. It's about it adding guy who can take off some of his defensive pressure, some size at the rim. If you go look at what they added to LeBron, they didn't get Kevin Love to take the ball out of his hands. Basically, it was Battier, Allen. It was just other people that could augment the game, but not take it over. I look at them and I'm like, when he was healthy, Porzingis would have 28-point nights, and you're like, oh, this feels like his team tonight. Like, this is his team. So again, that's viewed as a criticism. But if you watch how a team is run, they'll tell you what they are. I always say this: when you watch a football game and you watch what the team does in the first two series, they're telling you this is what we think we can do. Because you want to get ahead. If you lead in an NFL game, you take the lead, you win like 65% of the time. So teams are telling you, this is what the film says. We can do this. They can't stop this. There are times when I watch the Celtics and I'm watching the construction of them. And again, I'm spitballing, but there are times I watch them and they're telling me they have reservations whether Jayson can take a series over. Jokic, it's established. Ant already, it's absolutely established. Donovan Mitchell can be hot and cold, but Jesus. I've got to tell you something. I said this the other night. Jalen Brunson gets more consistent. He's not as athletic as Tatum. Jalen Brunson gets great looks. He gets great
I don't know
shots.
how he does it either.
Great shot. So anyway, it'll be viewed as a criticism, but I think it's a reality. Okay, I want to do this topic. So I saw this on the internet, and I apologize for not giving credit. But somebody said, everybody starts somewhere. Is JJ Redick supposed to go to the G League? A lot of these guys just don't want to coach college, the NIL. They just don't want to deal with limitations, NCAA. Is JJ Redick, is he a bad idea for the Lakers? You think Budenholzer would have taken the Lakers job and LeBron would have bought in? They couldn't get him out of town fast enough, and he had a title in Milwaukee. Giannis wasn't a fan. Is JJ Redick a terrible choice? Or are we overstepping that everybody starts somewhere. Where's he going to start? He's rich. He's not going to the G League. He's not taking that job. Jason Kidd, first experiment, not good. Now he's established himself. I mean, what is your take of JJ Redick, who people are getting gobbled up, could be head of the class now for the Lakers?
Yeah, so the experience thing doesn't matter as much to me for a couple of reasons. One, it's the classic like corporate ideology where like you're constantly towing the line between rewarding experience versus rewarding talent. And like there's always a fine line between like, oh, well, this guy's been doing it for 8 years, but it's like, yeah, but is he mediocre? Because that's the other question here. This guy, if JJ happens to have the talent for it, if he happens to have the basketball IQ or whatever for it, then by all means make the move. And so much of that depends on how he's acting behind the scenes in the interviews if they go through an interview process. But the second piece of it is you can counteract a lot of the lack of experience with just putting experienced head coaches on his staff. So you can address that by just giving him a really good assistant coaching staff. As far as I'm concerned with JJ Redick, like when it comes to the Lakers, what I'm really looking for is somebody that holds players accountable, because I look at them as a defensive-minded team anchored by two big athletic forwards in LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Just look at around the league. When the Lakers won, they won when they defended. You know, that was always their bread and butter. They made it to the Western Conference Finals last year as a defensive-minded team. They lost in the first round this year as an offensive-minded team. Going back to 2020, they won when they were a defensive-minded team. So I'm really interested in somebody that's going to hold them accountable. And I don't really know if JJ's willing to do that with LeBron. That's going to be something that is going to have to be flushed out in the interview process. But I'm not concerned about the experience, simply because if JJ's got the talent, he's got the talent, and they're going to anchor him with experienced NBA coaches that will help him navigate the 82-game regular season. And honestly, like it's really just going to be about like a collaborative effort between LeBron James and JJ Redick to kind of identify what the strengths and weaknesses of the roster are and go from there. It's really hard, honestly, Colin. I wonder what it's like for you covering the NFL too. Like it's really difficult with coaches, especially new coaches. We're not there for the interviews. Like with a player, I can go look at tape and I can get a really good feel for what he's good and bad at. But like with JJ, it's like, well, what's his philosophy going to be? What are his core principles that he's going to build the team on? Like, is he going to continue the 5-out offense they were running out of Darvin Ham? Or are they going to run something different? What are they going to do something different defensively? It's so hard to say because we're not in the room for those interviews. But if JJ interviews well and they give him good assistant coaches and he's got the talent for it, I absolutely think it could work.
Well, I mean, Duke kid, you listen to the podcast. He's a thoughtful guy. To me, it's experience is funny. It's creating the volume or working for years at ESPN or Fox Sports. Managers have come to me and said, "Hey, listen to a tape," or "What do you make of this guy?" And my take is, if you've never done network, who cares? Like, we listened to your tape and we're like, yep, he's ready to go. Okay. You didn't have to be somewhere. We thought you would be here. So it's Jerry Seinfeld was speaking at Duke. He had a commencement speech and he had a great line. He said, having stuff is nice, becoming stuff, or having stuff is nice, becoming something is really more important. And becoming something is misses, it's swings, it's an ascension. In every job I've ever had, I was a little over my skis for the first like 6 to 8 weeks. Like, I'm bailing water here. I'm trying to catch up. I had a friend once that got a job at Google, and she was like, I literally 6 weeks in, I'm like, oh, I'm dumb. And this is full of smart people. I'm too dumb to work at Google. And she goes, then the light goes on, you start clicking. And then like 6 months into it, you're like, okay, but it's like, it's okay. Darvin Ham learned on the job. If you're smart in any industry, you'll figure it out. Like, a lot of this stuff with coaching is like, I heard Frank Vogel, some complex defensive stuff. Beal didn't really buy in. Booker was close to an assistant coach, much closer than he was Vogel. Kevin was fine, but Kevin's Kevin at this point. And it was like Vogel just didn't resonate with all the guys in the room. JJ Redick, if LeBron buys him, will resonate with everybody in the room. So my take is, you start somewhere. If you get LeBron, there is some credibility, like with Jason Kidd. Like, there is credibility player to player. that JJ has. And I think it's kind of unspoken, but kind of the middle-aged, guy that didn't play. I always think you go into a locker room and about half the room is like, if the star doesn't buy into it, half the room's not buying into it. Maybe that's cynical, but I think everybody would buy into JJ Redick.
Well, it's like Micah Nori from the Timberwolves, or I can't remember his name, that assistant from the Celtics who just got signed by the Charlotte Hornets. It's like, if you bring in an assistant, it doesn't matter how much he's been grinding in the film room. Doesn't matter how much he impressed the previous organization. He's got to be able to look at LeBron and be like, hey, man, I need you to do this. And LeBron's got to be like, okay, and not only that, but I'll hold the rest of the team accountable to help them along the way. And so I do agree. That's the gravitas piece. And by the way, that's why they hired Darvin Ham. They thought Darvin Ham would be able to bring some of that like real gravitas to the situation. The thing with JJ is you got to acknowledge the risk, because you're right. Like, they let Darvin Ham learn on the fly. And he didn't really start making huge mistakes until this season with the roster, when he was like leaning into Cam Reddish. We've gone over it. But like, he made too many mistakes. And then the Lakers had a situation where they looked at the urgency of their situation and said, we have to make a move. And so I just hope that the Lakers front office and ownership understands that if you do take JJ, there is a risk. And even though I believe he could do this well, especially with good experienced staff behind him, anytime you go for a first-time head coach, there's what if he's just really bad at in-game adjustments? What if he's just really bad? Like, we don't know what it's going to be like. We're going to find out over time. And so that's where, like, let's say the alternative, let's say they were to get like a Kenny Atkinson, for instance. Like, Kenny Atkinson is more of a known commodity. He might be a higher floor, but like, maybe you don't get some of the upside you get if you get a freak talent. To your point, Steve Kerr. Like, Steve Kerr is regarded as one of the best coaches in the league. I think he's the second best coach in the league behind Eric Spoelstra. Like, that was a risk signing Steve Kerr. By the way, Steve Kerr was radical. He came into a Mark Jackson-led team that was spamming pick and roll, and he said, hey, Steph Curry, we're taking the ball out of your hands. We're going to lead the league in passes. We're going to run this motion ball and player movement offense. And I'm sure there were moments in training camp where it looked ugly. And I'm sure there were moments where the front office was looking down like, oh, this is weird. Like, we just went, two great playoff runs in 2013, 2014, just having Steph run spread pick and roll. So like, this is funky, but then it works. And now Steve Kerr is regarded as one of the best coaches in the league. So like, there's upside to going with the JJ, but there's also a risk. And so for me, I'm okay with that risk, because I don't really think there's any candidate out there that's a home run anyway. So I think right. There's risk all around to begin with.
Yeah, and I also think you have to, because the league is so player-driven, you have to be more patient. Like, in football, it's really owner, coach, GM-driven. So there's no excuse for a coach to say, I can't get the room. I can't get the room. Just cut guys. If you can't get the room, you're never going to be a good coach in the NFL. In the NBA, international soccer, where you have these Ronaldos and LeBrons that are literally... they're almost above the sport. They're these iconic figures. It is harder to get that attention. It is harder to get the buy-in. You hopefully get a Tim Duncan, I think sometimes we forget that Phil Jackson had replaced Doug Collins. Michael liked Doug. Doug's really intense, and there was some combative nature to his personality, but Doug Collins and Michael mostly worked. That was the first time Michael got real buy-in from Doug, and he got real buy-in from Phil. Phil's considered, the Zen master, the better coach, but part of it's buy-in. But I think LeBron has to also acknowledge, when Michael was in a prime for both Collins and Phil, like, LeBron's not there anymore. And I do think when he was completely unselfish for the 15 years in his prime, he could have scored 12 to 15 points more every game he played in. Now he can be he looks for soft spots in the defense that he can manipulate, smaller players that he can drive to the basket on. You've talked about this, is that I think LeBron gets a little selfish now, where it's more about legacy and production, is that I think it's time to step back. I'm not denying he's a top 6 player on any night, but it does feel like a little bit with LeBron, he's gotten a little selfish, where it's like, it's okay to acknowledge is you can't literally, even if you're great, you're not guaranteeing anything in this league. This is the West. It's packed. You could be a play-in team. And I know LeBron better than anybody, his game. But I do feel like with LeBron, he's a little more of a taker than a giver now. not just assists, but he's seeking play. He's seeking production sometimes to maintain. And I think it's time to step back. I think he should be a 2 on a team.
I think you're I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this was actually kind of a little bit of a subplot over the last 2 seasons, more so last year than this year because LeBron was so good this season. But like, for the record, I don't think it's legacy. I think it's confidence. Like, I think LeBron still thinks he's the guy, you know? And so I think a lot of times, like, LeBron confronts a basketball problem. Like, okay, we're in this slow down basketball game. I need to get something going for my team offensively. That means give me the ball. And then I'm going to, play basketball surgeon, bring this guy up. I'm going to get a switch. I'm going to attack this smaller player. Or, oh, I want to pick on Jokic and pick and roll. So we're going to bring Anthony Davis up to the screen. But one of the things that I noticed over the course of the last couple of years is LeBron almost confronted every basketball problem with him having the ball in his hands. And there is something to be said about, like, even though LeBron on the ball is still a very effective form of offense, it's not the same as it used to be. And specifically with Anthony Davis, I actually do think that LeBron would benefit from leaning more on Anthony Davis offensively over the course of the season. One, to build up Anthony Davis's confidence so that when they get into some of these situations where they need to lean on it, like, perfect example of this was game 2 against Denver when they blew the 20-point lead. It was LeBron and AD were picking on Nikola Jokic in ball screens. And then Michael Malone made a very smart adjustment. He moved Aaron Gordon onto Anthony Davis so that they could switch the LeBron AD pick and roll. And then LeBron, instead of going, hey, Aaron Gordon's on AD, let me just keep feeding AD against Aaron Gordon. Instead, he thought, I can beat Jokic in ball screens because I'm LeBron. So now I'm going to bring Rui up to the screen because Jokic is guarding Rui, and I'll start to pick on Jokic. And the Laker offense fell apart. And so, like, I think LeBron made the bad read because he was thinking, I'm LeBron James, but it's not I'm LeBron James. It's I'm 39-year-old LeBron James. So maybe I should go to this other guy who made 14 straight shots earlier in the game. Like, maybe I should go to him instead. And so I think you're right. Like, I think in general, and this is something I think that the Lakers, from an organizational standpoint, hiring a coach and as they approach this offseason, they need to actually give a clear ball handling option that's not LeBron, so that LeBron doesn't have to feel like he needs to approach every problem by him playing LeBron ball out above the break. And the big guy that I'm looking at, and I want them to go after DeJounte Murray. I don't know if you saw it today, but in the draft lottery, the Hawks got the #1 overall pick, which is super interesting because, like, I would imagine they're going to look at that as, let's rebuild around Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. And so I think they'll probably look to move DeJounte Murray this summer. And he's one of those guys where, like, DeJounte was really good in the play-in games and really good down the stretch of the season. He can really beat people off the dribble. He's an excellent point of attack defender. That's the kind of guy where, like, you can actually put yourself in a situation where you have because as good as Austin Reeves is, you kind of only want to lean on him. It's better that he can go in spurts. You don't want to lean on him for big doses.
I saw, if you look at DeJounte Murray's numbers when Trae Young didn't play, like, it's a little Jalen Brunson without Luka. You're like, oh no, he could be a 1 in a bad team or a top. I mean, like, when Trae Young didn't play, there were like 30% elevation in assists, 25%. Like, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I did a rant on this. And I was like, I mean, you watch him, he's obviously explosive. You can see that. But it's like, we did this with Brunson. You're like, well, he's kind of a 2 to Trae. And it's like, no, maybe they're 2 1s. The numbers when Trae doesn't play, DeJounte's numbers move up and his efficiency gets better. So that's an interesting one.
Yeah, to put it simply, the Luka Trae, like, heliocentric, do everything player, it is difficult to be the #2 for that guy. We can at least admit that. Right. If anything, it's like a testament to Kyrie, because, like, Kyrie's the kind of guy, like, in game 3 or game 2 who can score 8 points and still dominate the game as an excellent defensive player and passer and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, like, it is difficult to be in that role. And DeJounte Murray in particular, like, he's a guy that, like, he can really dance with the ball, beat people off the dribble, and make stuff happen. And so, like, if he's And what no one ever said about DeJounte Murray is he's Klay Thompson. Like, he's not going to stand out on the wing and just catch and shoot threes all game. And so, like, it actually makes a lot of sense. I actually look at that as if I was the Lakers this summer, I'd look 2 routes. Through the trade, I'd look for DeJounte Murray. Through free agency, because they'll have their mid-level exception that they can use every year, I would target a real center, like an actual big center that can play next to LeBron James and Anthony Davis and give them a big look. I think if they do that and Jared Vanderbilt gets healthy, they all of a sudden become a much more physically imposing team with a lot more ball handling because of DeJounte Murray. Like, I actually think that there's if they nail this summer and the head coach hire works out, I think there's a small opportunity for them to do some damage next year. But yeah, like the JJ Redick piece, I really do think that it's just as good as any other option out there. It's not like there's some slam dunk home run option. And so I kind of think as long as he nails the interviews and they put the right staff around him, it could work.
Jason Timpf, Hoops Tonight. As always, great stuff.
It's good to see you, man. Looking forward to next week.